Welcome to the Haven Community Conversations podcast, where we talk about faith, life, and everything in between. And this week, we're here with Robbie Windham, who I like to call the mother of our church. She really is a pillar ever since she came to this church, and she's recently accepted the position of a deaconess, something I've been begging her to do for years, and so she's finally done that. And so happy to have you with us, Robbie.
Glad to be here.
Well, let's start off with a couple easy questions. So I call you the church mother, but how many actual kids and grandkids do you have?
I have 5 children by birth. I have a few that are adopted in, of course, but and they call me mom. And then I have 3 grandchildren, and number 4 is soon to arrive. His mother hopes sooner than later. His due date is July 4th.
Wow.
So yeah, but pretty much anytime after this week he can come.
Yeah.
And she can have him at her birthing center. So we're excited. We don't have a name yet, but we know it's a boy.
Yeah. Now all your grandkids are toddlers, right?
They are.
Yeah.
The oldest is 3.
Wow.
Yep. 3,
Wow.
2, and 18 months.
That family builds up.
Yeah,
Builds up
quickly.
quick. They don't call it the Windham Inn for nothing, right?
That's true.
What's something that your family or close friends would say that you're famous for?
Wow. Famous? I don't know.
Or infamous?
I guess just liking to have crowds around all the time. Like,
Yeah, you a people person?
oh, yeah. I didn't always realize that, but yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Are you are you extroverted?
I have grown to be.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't come natural to me as a child. I think I was destined to be, but there were things that happened that kind of held me back
Right,
from that.
I hear you.
And so I had to learn that it was okay to be that way, you know.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, yeah.
and as I've gotten older, I've just become a lot more comfortable in my own skin, I guess, and I don't mind talking to anyone, honestly. Like,
Right. Do you need your alone time?
yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Like, my house can be
Yeah.
a buzz,
Yeah.
like, for until all hours of the morning, and so I'm like, good night, keep it to a dull roar. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all do, in a sense, need our alone time. What is your go-to comfort food?
Oh my. I would have said ice cream, and I know you love ice cream, but I'm lactose intolerant now,
Oh,
and
wow.
even the ones
I
that
did not
are
know
lactose free, I just can't do them. They give me a tummy ache.
Yeah.
So probably, and honestly, I'm not a sweet eater. That would have been probably the only thing that I would have cared for sweet. So really salty popcorn is a
Okay.
huge favorite. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. If your life had a title, what would it be?
I don't know, like seriously fun, I guess. I don't know.
Seriously fun?
So I have a serious side and I have a fun side.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I like to play on words. Well, let's pray, and then let's
Okay.
dig in a little bit deeper
Okay.
into your life. All right. Father, we thank you for another conversation. Thank you for Robbie. Thank you for the blessing she's been to our church, to my family personally, and to me. And Lord, we just pray for a blessed conversation. Pray that you would be the center of it and you'd be our guide. And we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Tell us a little bit about your life growing up. What formed Robbie?
So I am one of 3 children, but really just one of 2 because my youngest brother died at birth. So we never got to live life with him in our presence. But and my brother and I are 2.5 years apart in age, so it was one of those love-hate relationships, as siblings often are. Love him. He's an amazing man of God. He's an amazing husband, father, son, brother, everything about him. He's been a rock in my life on many occasions. And
The one, real quick, the one that passed away at birth?
no. My brother that lives in North Carolina is
No,
the
no,
one.
no,
Oh,
I was wanting to ask
the
you.
one that
Yes,
passed
was that
away.
before or
So I
older or
was
younger?
12. He
You
was
were
he was
12.
younger.
Okay.
So
okay.
my brother was 10 and I was 12
Okay.
when he was born. And we nearly lost my mother. My mother, her uterus burst trying to deliver, and came straight to death's door.
Wow.
And in fact, they had to resuscitate her. They were pumping blood in her on both sides, squeezing the bags in because she was losing it so fast till they could get her into emergency hysterectomy. So that was a really a pretty pivotal moment in my life, because I mean, you already know I've had lots of death in my life, and I think that having death introduced into your life at a young age is kind of pretty confusing, honestly. I was introduced to death very early on, because I was 2.5 when my granny on my dad's mom died, and we lived right there with them. So that was
Yeah.
probably my first experience with death, and I don't remember, much about any of that.
Yeah.
But I think that I came to know the Lord when I was 9. I had my mother. My mother was the spiritual leader in our home. Really, my dad was not saved, and would not become a Christian for several more years later. But my mom and I basically were baptized at the same time. I was 9, and I think Mom really had accepted Christ into her life sooner than that, but she had a bit of growing that she needed to do, a little bit of understanding that she needed to grasp, and so, but I was asking lots of questions, which spurred her on, I guess. So I was always in church. I was brought up in church my whole life, and but I began to question, like, who is God? What is He all about? And what am I supposed to do with that? And we had a wonderful pastor that he became the pastor of our home church when I was 5, and he's still a huge part of my life even now. He's an amazing man of God that just loves people so well and is so gentle with his approach with sharing the gospel. He never was abrasive or threatening in any way, and I think that's truly what led my dad and his whole family to the Lord was his approach. He would just come and he would sit and he would chat and just always show up just to visit, check on his people. And I think that had my dad put down his defenses, and so, but for me, he answered lots of questions, and he was so good about doing that. And he was the one who really got me through the loss of my little brother, because I was pretty upset with not understanding, why would God do this, so. Because at the same time that my mom was in the hospital that entire summer, attempting to not lose this baby. She kept going into premature labor, but there was a lady in the room with her that shared a room with her that was there just almost as long as my mom, and she was not mentally healthy, and she did not want her baby, and she would say things even with the children in the room.
Oh, wow.
And so I didn't understand, why God would allow our baby to not survive, but allow her baby to survive when she didn't really even want this baby. But I did understand more of that later. The dad to that baby definitely needed that baby.
Wow.
He loved her dearly, and I got to see a glimpse of that. And our pastor was so good, and he just tried to gently guide me through all that painfulness. And not having my mom there was another huge factor, and it was difficult for my dad to answer those tough questions because he was not a believer, so he didn't understand it himself, and so he was struggling with his own emotions as well. But I think it would have been great if I would have understood that this is all temporary. This is just the here and now, and it doesn't last forever. But when you're 12, you don't get that,
Yeah.
So,
So you
but
came to the Lord during all of
no,
this?
I really had already accepted Christ about 3 years prior.
Okay, so it was just that
So I was a
first
fairly
adversity that
yeah,
you had faced, right?
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure, the worst of it. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
just shuffling from one aunt's house to another the whole summer, and
Mm.
them. I mean, my one aunt we stayed with was she had no children of her own, and I think she was at a total loss for how to get me through all that. Just
Did you know you almost lost your mother at the
I
time, or did you
did.
find out later?
No, I did. I begged to go and see her in the hospital,
Mm.
and my dad was very opposed to that. And my aunt convinced him that she would take me, and I don't know if it was a great idea or not, honestly. Mom was not in a good way, and she does not remember any of that. And I was instructed that I had to keep my emotions together. I couldn't fall apart. If I started to lose it, I had to leave the room because she was that fragile. And so the very first thing I did was walk in and just say, "Hi, Mom," and she just looked straight through me, like she didn't know who I was, and I lost it. I had to leave the room. So, yeah, my aunt and I had a good little crying session out in the hallway.
Yeah.
So, but the Lord was good, and He, spared my mom, and she got stronger. In the interim of mom was in the hospital for weeks after that, and we had to have the baby's funeral, and my
Yeah.
dad had to endure all that
Yeah.
alone,
Yeah.
without my mom and my brother and I as well, and it was just one of those things when you're going through something that difficult, you wish you had your mom there, So, but it was bad enough to get through that, but then when mom did come home and we're all reunited at home, then we have to face the reality that we had prepared for this baby and there is no baby.
Yeah.
And mom was a private griever, and I didn't really quite gather that either. Like in my child's mind, I thought she just didn't care. Like, wow,
Yeah.
she doesn't
Yeah.
cry or anything. She told me later she regretted that. She wished she would have been a little bit more open with sharing her grief. She just didn't know how well to do that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
we've talked about it over the years, and I fully have a better understanding of it as an adult. So, but I think that's, as a parent, you think that holding it all together is what you need to do for your children, and that's not always the case. They
Yeah.
need to see you be vulnerable, and
Yeah.
they need to see that you do have your own grief and
Yeah,
weaknesses
that's
and
good.
everything else. So,
Yeah. A lot of wisdom
so
in that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you've been through a lot of adversity. You're part of a military family. Now, your family growing up was not
No.
military, right? But
No.
you married.
I had an uncle that was in the Army, and he would come and go, and we loved that. We thought he was like, he was my uncle that lived next door to me, Katie and Leanne's dad, that I was so close to all the way till the end. But yeah, he would come home with all of his gear, and we were pretty enamored by that. And my dad had some cousins that served, and I would just see them on occasion. But and then a couple of my mom's brothers served in the military. But no, my dad never did, and my dad really couldn't have. He had had a severe car accident, so he had one leg shorter than the other, where they had to
Yeah.
repair his
Yeah.
leg. But Kevin's dad did. Kevin's dad was in the Air Force, and he served. And there were others in Kevin's family, so there was kind of that, I guess, that draw towards
Now,
that.
I know
so.
you and Kevin met pretty young, but was he already in the military when y'all met? No?
No, we met in high school. I was only 15
Okay.
when I first met him. And my mom and dad had
I'm a high school sweetheart,
a
too.
fast, hard rule about no dating until I was 16. But they
Yeah.
kind of fudged on that a little, because I
Mm-hmm.
had my best friend was having her birthday party in March before I turned 16 in May,
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of let me go. It was a group thing, of course, but that was our first date was to the Montgomery County Fair, and I teased him. He abandoned me. His car broke down and he never showed up to pick me up, but he didn't call. I was like, what were you thinking? And so I just said, okay, well, I guess I'm going to load up with all the other girls and just go. And so, and then he came sheepishly crawling in and like about 2 hours later. And I don't know how he ever found us out there, but he did. And so, he said, my car broke down,
Wow.
which it was prone to do.
Wow. Yeah. Well, his car breaking down could have ruined everything. No
Yeah.
kids and grandkids, and
That's right.
it's funny how things work out. Yeah. Before we get more into that, did you always want to be a mother?
Oh, yeah.
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 From a young age?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always loved kids. I was the oldest grandchild. Not technically. I have my cousin Ernie was about 6 months older than me, but they lived in California. So I was the oldest grandchild on scene. Let's just say that. So I was very attached to my pawpaw. He never remarried after my granny died, and so he was always a very big part of our life. He saw us every day. Every day he would go from house to house and just check in on everybody. And he lived with his sister. Her husband had passed away, and she never remarried, and so they lived together till the day they died. And well, she died first, and then my papa moved in with my uncle next door, and lived out the rest of his life there. But so he was a part of my life every day.
Yeah.
And being the oldest among all of the cousins, because we all lived there on Perry Hill, as we call it. And so I was like the mother of all the group, and they would say, don't let them do anything bad.
Yeah.
Like I could prevent that, right? But yeah, I would be put in charge, of overseeing everyone, and I guess that just was a natural thing for me. Being a firstborn, you're kind of, most of the time you have those leader skills, I guess, anyway. So, but yeah, we were all very close. All the cousins were more like siblings, so we really still are.
Yeah.
So we see each other and talk to each other all the time.
So you and Kevin started dating. How long did you date before you married?
4 years.
4 years. All
He
right.
went away. He went away to boot camp, and I went away to college.
Okay. So
I
you
went
went your separate ways.
Yeah.
And long distance
thought
relationship.
I was going to die.
Yeah.
My heart hurt. It
Yeah.
did, really. I loved him a lot. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So y'all waited.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
did. Yeah. We started planning our wedding while he was in basic training. And so I was basically doing it alone. And my mom's like, I'm no help to you at all. I've never planned a wedding in my life. My mom and dad eloped, and so she had never really had a wedding. And so he failed a test, and that delayed his graduation. And I'm like,
man.
I said, Mister, you're so lucky I don't have these invitations printed yet. It just pushed it back like 1 week. And so, yeah. It was a God-designed thing, though.
Yeah.
Our anniversary is one day before my parents' anniversary. And now Kanan and Whitney's anniversary is one day after that. So 14th, 15th, 16th of May, we all have anniversaries.
Wow. So what's it like? What was it like raising a family in a military atmosphere?
So adapting to military life was didn't necessarily come easy to me at first, because I'd never moved anywhere my whole life, and my whole family had lived there forever, never moved away. And to be honest, I didn't really even know how to make friends, because I never had to. Everybody knew us, and so, and I was pretty painfully shy. Just, you'd never know that now.
Yeah.
But I had to learn to open myself up and engage with people that I didn't know. And that was pretty nerve-wracking for me, but so yeah, just acclimating to that, being away from home first, and then once we started having children, I don't know, I feel like we always, everywhere we went, we always made sure we found a home church. That was one of the first things we would do, and so we kept kind of a circle of friends everywhere we went. They usually had a connection with our church and the military too, really. But yeah, to me, the military life wasn't bad. It has its challenges, because Kevin would go TDY, which is a temporary duty, and be gone for months, at a time. But
Would this happen when you were, even when you're stationed overseas or in Alaska, or were y'all together most of the time?
Well, so his job changed. You know, when he first came in, he worked the flight line. He worked on the planes. He was aviation navigation system specialist, and so he did work the flight lines. And so when they would have, war games or whatever, he'd go and he even did that. Even once he transitioned into his new career field, which was computer maintenance, they would still have TDYs, but he didn't have. To me, they weren't as long. They didn't last as long. A little bit different now. Military's changed a lot.
Yeah.
And these guys are, going away from their families for a year at a time or more. We never faced that. When Kevin took his spot in Okinawa, it could have been a remote assignment and he would have gone for a year by himself. We opted to do an extended remote and go as a family. And we just had Candy and Kanan at the time. And I'm telling you, I do not regret that one second. It was like, I wasn't happy about it. I was not in a good place in my heart and my head, either one, because I just lost my dad. And I literally remember saying to God, I can't believe you're making me leave my mom. Like, that's so awful. And I feel like I'm shirking all my responsibilities onto my brother and just loaded it all off on him, and I'm leaving the country. But I'm telling you, we got there, and it was an amazing experience. I said, now I know what it is to live in the mission field. It is pretty awesome. We went to a mission church there that's still there. Our pastor is still pastoring there, and we get to catch up with them once or twice a year. And you get to actually see, the funds that come in to support those missionaries. You're seeing them put to work there, and so it was really cool. And they would do off-island missions as well, and they'd go to the Philippines and Thailand, and there's several different locations they go to, and they would do medical missions trips. So anybody that could pull a tooth or give an injection or whatever, they'd load up and go. But and they still do those even now. But yeah, it's I think it was a great experience for the kids. They just have friends all over the world, like, it's so cool to have friends all over the world.
They still have friends,
So
their connections. That's great.
Yeah. Especially Candy and Kanan, because they were a little older. And then, Keelan was just a baby when Kevin retired from the military, so he doesn't remember a whole lot about any of that. Kendall has little vague memories, not too much either, but obviously Kaysen has a little bit of a memory, or he wouldn't have been intrigued by the military as much as he was. So, I think he wanted to follow in his dad's footsteps, and his granddaddy as well. So, but it was a good life for us. It was. It had its challenges, which I guess everything in life does. It just depends on how you face it. So, but we have wonderful friends, to this day, that are just all over the place. In fact, we have a cruise coming up that we're going to be going on with a couple of the couples. One coming from Alaska, and the other are coming from Pennsylvania.
Wow.
But we were all stationed together
In Alaska?
Well, originally in Okinawa, the one couple. But the second couple was in Okinawa. We just weren't there at the same time. So we all went to the same church there. And so, but yeah, we all were in Alaska together for the 6 years that we were there. We spent most of our holidays together.
Is your cruise to Alaska?
It's not. It's actually the K-Love cruise. We're going to go do a mission.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Where's it going?
I don't even know. I haven't gotten all the details yet.
Wow.
So.
Wow, exciting. A week long or what?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very exciting. Well, how's some of the ways that God has met you? I know you've been through several seasons of life. What's something? How's God met you in those seasons, and what's something He's taught you?
I've always just known God was like my, He was what I needed to cling to through everything and anything. And some of those seasons were more difficult to kind of catch a glimpse of God in it. And you're like, God, are you even there? I remember saying one time, I feel like my prayers are just going to the ceiling and bouncing off and coming back down. Are you there, God? But in my heart, I knew He really was there. It's just I was not in a right place to be able to know that, I guess, to feel that, and just cling to that. And then there are those times that you've just sense His sweet presence, like you could just bask in that all day long, of course. But in those difficult times, I think that just keeping it in your head that He is there, He's still working on your behalf, and this is not going to last forever, prayerfully. But yeah, the hard times are, they're no easier for, you know, no matter what age group you're in or what category you fit into. They're going to be hard times.
Yeah.
We're living in a sinfully fallen world,
Yeah.
and so of course there are going to be things that happen that
When
are
I say,
not pleasant.
when I
So-
ask what's your lowest moment, is there something that immediately comes to mind, or are there
when I
several
lost
things?
my dad.
When you lost your dad?
So my dad had lung cancer, and at the time that he was diagnosed, we were living in Washington State. We were in the Tacoma, Seattle area, and it was a pretty long season that we had, just wrestled with it. Kevin had just transferred over from being working flatline to working computers, and so he had to go back to school for about 9 months. Yeah, I think it was 9 months. And 4 months of that was in Keesler, Mississippi, and we could not go with him. And then 5 months of that was in Panama City, Florida, and we were not allowed to go with him then either, except that part of being forced to cross-train into a new career field, he got a base of preference. Well, he was supposed to. And so he chose Panama City. That was,
Okay.
we'd been living in San Antonio, which was a great gig for us because it was very close to home. And we really enjoyed San Antonio. And close enough to come if we wanted to, and not if we didn't want to, So, but we got to, they literally, PCS moved us, packed all of our stuff, and hauled us to Florida, only to get there and be told that his assignment did not exist because it had already been filled, because they screwed his orders up and they didn't put it on there. It was blank. There was nothing on the form. And so they're like, "Where are you going?" He said, "Here." And they're like, "No, you're not." And so we really moved there for 5 whole months. And then PCS moved us all the way across country to Washington State, only to get there and find out that the Seattle-Tacoma area had made Forbes' top list of greatest places to live, and it went nuts. The economy was off the chain, and so an apartment was ridiculously priced. And the military is always about 10 years behind the power curve on any of adjustments, cost of living allowances and things like that. And so you almost couldn't afford to live there. And because we had moved and moved and moved, and that always costs you. They move you, but it's still going to cost you. And so we had kind of, used up all of our savings that we had, and we had to live on the economy. We couldn't move straight on base,
Yeah.
which would have been better, financially. But in all of that interim is when we found out that my dad was ill, and my brother and my mom said, "You probably should come. It's a serious surgery." And so we made our trek all the way across country and came home, and I brought the children with me, and Kevin, of course, had to go back. He couldn't take that much leave. And we stayed for probably about 2 months that time, and saw my dad through his surgery, and we knew they did not get all the cancer. It had already, made its way onto his esophagus. And so once he somewhat recovered and began his treatments, the children and I made our way back to Washington, and almost 1 year to the day, I, am getting a phone call saying, you need to come home. He's not well. And I knew, I mean, we kept in touch. So I knew that things were not looking good, and we'd been praying and praying. But when my brother said, I think you need to come, if
Yeah.
just, it's best you come see him now. And so again, we made that long trek across country, and financially, there was no way we could afford to fly, so we're driving it. And then we stay again. It was probably about 3.5 months, and this was the time that my dad, he didn't survive. He continued to decline, and all the while, you're just practically begging God, to heal him, and lots of people praying, But I will say that my dad, man, when he gave his life to God, and he had done that prior to ever being diagnosed with cancer, but he was a majorly changed man. People would be like, what in the world? In fact, he worked in the oil field, and his guys that worked with him said, something's different about you, Johnny. What's the deal? And he's like, I came to know the Lord. I gave my heart to God. And they're like, well, it's obvious. They were just stunned. And so, I was so thankful that, he had
that's comforting.
made that decision. And but it was difficult, watching him suffer, and then ultimately die. And it was really about a week before he passed away that Kevin found out he had orders to go to Japan, and that was not a good thing at all.
Oh,
Like,
so
it was
it was
very,
right.
very hard.
Wow, right after that.
Yeah. So it was something I kicked and screamed and wrestled with God about a lot.
Going to Japan.
Yeah, I did not want to go, and but God had a plan. He knew, and He knew what was best, even though I couldn't see it. I'm so thankful I went. I have treasured memories of that time. God meeting me right where I was. He never left me. Literally, like I can remember just wanting to curl up in a ball and do nothing. I had to leave my mom and go back to pack for this horrible move. It was the worst move we ever had to make, and for more than just the reason of having lost my dad. But it's a difficult move because you have to. It's a special duty assignment, so you can't take all your things with you. You have to put your things in storage for 3 years. So you're only allowed to take certain things, certain amount of weight. And you have to separate all that stuff. So what you want in your suitcase better be in your suitcase, and your suitcase better be in your car, so it doesn't get packed. And so there was a lot of prep work, and I was not in the right frame of mind for doing that. So I was not handling it very well. And Kevin was patient and gentle with me beyond measure. The children were looking at me like probably I had a third eyeball, honestly. But God was right there, just loving me through the whole thing. And I had this moment where I was just so bitter. I didn't even realize I was angry, honestly. But I was. And I remember just having I was at the house by myself, packing. And I said, I hate this. And I really literally heard the voice of God ask me, what do you hate? And I stopped cold in my tracks, and I was like, I had to think about it. Like, oh God, I'm so sorry. It's not you. And I literally said, Satan, I hate you. I really hate you for everything you're not even worth. And it was that light switch moment, honestly. I faced the reality of going to Okinawa with a better perspective. I won't say it was like, yeehaw.
Perfect.
It wasn't like I was enthusiastic about it,
Yeah.
but it was with a better mindset than what I had to begin with. And so, and then of course I was anxious about it, because going to a foreign country, and I was like, oh, I don't know. It's a whole different world. You get there, you don't have a car, you don't have a house, you don't know anyone, and it was something. But we made friends right away with our friends that we are doing the cruise with. Honestly, they were a godsend. And then I learned I was pregnant with our middle son, and I grieved for that because my dad would not know him and he would not know my dad. And then my
Yeah.
friend Leslie said, yes, he will. I was like, what? And she said, he's going to know your dad because you're going to talk about your dad and it's going to be as though he knows him. She's so right, 100% right. And then when Kason was born, he looked like my dad. And I said, that was that kiss from God right
Wow.
there. I cried. I just looked at that child and I cried. And I thought, it's just me, you know, I'm just imagining this in my mind. And we came home. We had orders already. Kevin's unit shut down, and we literally were having to wait for me to have this baby before we could leave the island. And then he had to have his 2-week checkup to get cleared to travel, and a passport, a newborn, a newborn passport. And so we came home on our way to Alaska, and one of my dad's really good friends, she worked with my dad. She's really closer to my age, and she said, I don't want to say anything to get anybody upset, but does he look like your dad? And I just laughed and I said, oh my gosh, I think so too. And she said, oh, I didn't know if I should say it or not. And she said, he does. He looks so much like your dad. And so, yeah, and I see my dad's mannerisms in him as
In
well.
Jason.
So, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, so sweet.
Yeah.
And so I say that was a God kiss. You know,
Yeah.
God knew I needed that, you know, so,
Yeah.
but yeah.
So cool. So cool. What's something that you wish you could tell your younger self?
Be brave. I wish I had been more brave and more adventurous and outgoing and understood that that was okay to be that way. You know, like,
Yeah.
I had a lot of trauma in my life as a little girl, and I withdrew and to my shell. You know, I call that my tough exterior. I felt like if I built those walls up, that nobody could get past that and hurt me. You know. And so it was phony baloney. But in my mind, that was me, like, keeping everybody at arm's distance, I guess,
Yeah.
because I didn't trust them. And
Yeah.
so I had to learn to trust, and I had to learn to let down that guard and be a little bit vulnerable.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm so glad I did.
It's interesting. You know who Brene Brown is?
No.
Well, she's she specializes in vulnerability and shame and stuff like that. But she'll talk to military personnel. She has a room full of military, and she'll ask them, you know, ask them the difference. You know, what is vulnerability and courage have in common? And they can't ever. A lot of times, people can't see that. You know,
Yeah.
they think they're incompatible or they're opposites. You know, this is vulnerability and this is courage over here. And she says every time you go onto the battlefield, do you feel vulnerable? They say,
Yeah.
yeah. I said, well, courage, you can't have courage without vulnerability.
Yeah, I love
so
that.
when you said
Yeah.
that, you can't be brave
Yeah.
unless you're willing to be
Yeah.
vulnerable,
Yeah.
because courage or bravery is overcoming the vulnerability. If you're not vulnerable, you're just probably crazy, you know? So,
Well, I hope I'm not crazy.
no. What's one thing you'd pass on to the next generation?
Try to love people well, all people. I think we miss so many opportunities and the beauty in this world by passing judgment too quickly a lot of times, or just thinking someone's different than you and you just don't have an appeal to want to engage, I guess. I guess, like, even for me, and for me, I think it is, you can find a kind word for just about anybody, honestly, if you try hard enough. But I look at people that may not be like me. They may not look like me. They might not act like me. But I see that as, you know, a creation of God, that He loves them still the same. And He wants them to know. And how will they know if we
Yeah.
don't tell them,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So, and if we don't allow them to at least inch into our hearts, then they may never know, you know. So, but yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
try hard to love people right where they are.
I
You
think
know,
I
so
think
you
you.
say that a lot too, I think.
Yeah.
But
But I was going to say, I think you do that well.
I don't know that I always did because I was wrapped up in my own fears, I guess, you know, just
Hmm.
kind of. But even as a little girl, I loved people. I really did. My aunt worked at the Texan Cafe on the downtown square in Conroe, and there was this. The cook there was a large black woman named Bert,
Hmm.
and I loved that woman.
Hmm.
Oh my gosh, I loved her so much.
Hmm.
And I can remember saying, Miss Bert, and I don't really know how old I was. I couldn't have been maybe 7, maybe
Hmm.
8. I said, Miss Bird, I'm going to come live with you. And she said, no, honey, what would I do with the little white girl at my house? So I just didn't, you know,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
that
Didn't think
didn't,
about it. Yeah.
I was like, what do you mean? You
Yeah.
know? But yeah, those negative influences are more created in children, I
Hmm.
think, you know, the segregation and, you
Hmm.
know, racism and all that, you know,
Hmm.
just, I don't think it comes natural to a child. I don't think they see a difference, you know. I
Yeah.
watched little Harper and she doesn't care, you know, she's like, hey, friend, you know. So I think we need to be more like that, be more like that
Hmm.
child and try to
I
love
think
people.
too, when you're doing church right, it creates a lot of diversity, right? Because
Yeah.
heaven is going to be diverse, right?
Yep.
Who's before the throne? People from every tribe, tongue,
Yep. I
and
can't
nation.
wait.
That's what I say. If you don't like diversity, you're not going to like it there. But I remember our small group was at a lunch one time, and Michael Smith had gotten up to go to the restroom or something. Somebody stopped him at the other table. We had this big long table. It was our celebration at the end of the semester or whatever. We were just having dinner together, and
Being loud and having fun. Yeah.
yes, and somebody stopped him. They were like, "Excuse me, what? We're sitting here trying to figure out who this group is. It's just a bunch of different type of people. We couldn't figure out if it's a business or whatever." He's like, "That's my church," So he
I
was
love it.
bragging on it. But yeah, definitely
I
think.
love sitting at the back of churches where
Hmm.
you can watch, like, I don't know. I just love that diversity. And the church we went to in Okinawa was very diverse like that because
Oh,
we,
because it's military, I guess,
yeah,
right?
exactly. But
Yeah.
there was the Ryukyu College there.
Hmm.
So the Ghanaian African government would send, they are big about forever education. You can take
Okay.
classes till the day you die. And so it was mostly the men, the Ghanaian men that would come. We had a couple of the wives that were there, but they would wear their colorful clothing and bring their bongo drums, and they were amazing. And their worship, man, they really meant it. They were
Oh
in
wow.
it full
I'm
fledged.
jealous.
And then
Yeah.
you had you know a Filipino group, and then we had the Samoan group that was there as well, and a handful of Japanese and Hispanics, and yeah, it was just so
Wow.
awesome. And you could sit at the back of that church because I had Kason, and we had a nursing mother's room that had a big window, and so it was at the very, very back. So you got a bird's eye view all
Hmm.
the way forward, and it was the most beautiful thing to watch the whole church worship. And I said, "This is what heaven's going to be like." I
Yes.
cannot wait.
Love it. Love it. Love it. One thing I think I know about you, correct me if I'm
Okay.
wrong, and it's because I see it in me, is I have a high sense of justice. Am I right about that with you as well?
Yep.
Yeah. And you love people very well. How do you love difficult people?
You know, I think that's something God grew in me for sure. Um, and I don't know that I even now
Hmm.
always do it well. Depending on the situation, I can let my emotions get wrapped
Hmm.
up in it, I guess. But um, I think God has just shown me to look at that person from a different perspective. Like, who were they as a child?
Mm.
How were they treated as a child?
Yeah.
And then keeping in mind that they are His creation, that
Yeah.
He loves them as much as He loves
Hmm.
me. There's not a hierarchy there. You know, He
Yeah.
doesn't love Christians more than He
Yeah.
loves the unsaved. He
Yeah.
does not. In fact, He would leave us behind for that one,
Yeah.
as He tells us, to
Yeah.
leave the 99. And so I think that He almost gives you a little bit of a broken heart for the lost. So those difficult people need somebody to love them too,
I
so.
love that. I love that. Change your learning to change our anger into a broken heart, and so when my sense of justice is high, and a lot of times I tell, justice is a good thing,
Sure. It's a necessary thing, yeah.
yeah, it's at the heart of it. I always tell people, we think of justice as like the courtroom, but the judgment or whatever, but justice is righting a wrong,
Yeah.
but my high sense of justice is like when I don't like something, then I get
Yeah.
upset about it. But I like what you said there about turning your turning your anger into a broken heart for the person. I think that comes with empathy, and it's Robbie. I'm there too. It's something I'm still learning, and I think it took me a long time. It wasn't until I was in faith walking until I really started to see from looking at my own what we call first formation and start to look out and see it in other people
Yeah.
and start to say, I went through all this brokenness in my life, so did they,
Yeah.
right? And they may or may not have the awareness yet
Yeah.
to see it in their
Yeah.
own life, and so
And I
have
think
a
most of
broken
them are
heart for 'em.
searching.
Yeah.
I see so many hurting people that are, and that's what they're just lashing out because they're hurting more than anything, and that's because they don't have that, foundation. They don't have the knowledge of who God really is to them. Um, and I think that is, we have to bear that in mind, or we would just be angry all the time.
Well, my last question for you
Okay.
is, if there's someone who's listening who feels overwhelmed or maybe unsure in their faith, what would you say to encourage them?
I think there's so many distractions in this world intentionally. I believe it's a intentional plot from the enemy, of course, to keep our minds going at all times, the speed of light. Um, Slow down and try to remember who you are to God, because that's what it really boils down to. Is you have to know that you're loved. You have to know that He has created you to be exactly who you are, because He has a purpose for that. There's not another person in this world like you. You are the only one with your blueprint, and He has a plan. Everything about you, good, bad, ugly, it all matters. Um, I don't think that God ever really allows anything to happen in your life that He's not going to use it at some point.
Yeah.
I've told several people just recently, your story, your history, the things that have happened to you, the things you've done, uh, are your testimony. When you come to know the Lord, He will end up using that for somebody else. In fact, I had that conversation with Roberta before she gave her testimony on that Sunday. Uh, I'm so thankful she did. That was an amazing, amazing thing. And she was pretty nervous, but I told her, I said, God has a plan.
Yeah.
He's going to use your story as your testimony.
Yeah.
And I believe that's true for every human being out there. Well, no matter, there's nothing that you can do that will make God stop loving you.
Yeah. That's
So,
good.
yeah.
And I think sometimes, a lot of times, I think Christians need to hear that who've maybe been on the mountaintop and then all of a sudden they've taken a tumble, and
Yeah.
now they're down in the valley.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we look at our testimony as back then, and then we just screwed it
Yeah.
all. We screwed it all up. But
And it doesn't mean that it's not going to be hard,
yeah,
because I think that's a misnomer as well, is that once you become a Christian, that, everything's going to be rosy and God's just going to make it all better. And that's not how that works, I mean, we're still living in a sinfully fallen world where bad things happen, and we're apt to get all tied up in that, and we're going to have pains and heartache the same as anyone. I think it's trying to keep it in a perspective of, this is not forever. This is all temporal, and He conquered death You know, death is a painful thing. That doesn't make that pain go away.
Yeah.
It doesn't make that longing and sadness disappear. But it is important to remember this is not it.
Yeah.
This is just temporary. We're only here passing through.
Yeah.
And it's, yeah.
It's good. That's good wisdom, Robbie. Is there anything else that we didn't hit on that you wanted to share?
No, I don't think so.
Well, thank you. Thank you
good.
so much for coming on and talking
I was
with me.
nervous about this, but
You made it.
I did.
We're at the end. Love you, Robbie.
love you too, Scott.